Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. We've prepared a little bit of the history of the Volume 2 that I'm going to go over first, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about one of my stories. So what happened with Volume 2 was we already had a lot of success with Volume 1, and we were totally psyched. But because the Festival of Books comes around every year, we thought, let's do it again. And it got really crazy for a little while. When you knock on a door and it opens, it feels wonderful for a moment, and then it's time to figure out what comes next. We were really stoked to set up the Made in LA banner for the first time and stand under it, interact with readers, find out what they were looking for, and when they asked for more stories about Los Angeles, we were excited to deliver on that. 2 years, 2 anthologies, and 24 short stories and novellas later, here we are. Our hope by sharing these stories is to shine some light on more facets of the jewel that is Los Angeles. It's not clear where the phrase, "don't quit your day job," came from, but as fiction writers and storytellers and creative types, we know it well. That's why, because we were excited by the popularity of our first anthology, we made another, all the while keeping our busy normal lives running as usual. We had to keep paying the bills after all, and while we delved deeper into the stories inspired by LA that we wanted to write and share. So we acted on our inspirations, worked through the rough bits, and settled and resettled deadlines until it all became worth it when our second anthology was officially born right before the LA Festival of Books 2019. We chose the title Chasing the Elusive Dream because we're creative types living in Los Angeles. We're surrounded by lots of other creative types living in Los Angeles. And we recognize that every time we're dazzled and intimidated or amazed by a new writer we come across. Opportunities are everywhere, but each opportunity is not available to everyone. Each of us has to accept this with grace and humility, find the joy in the storytelling process, with the goal of connecting with others through our own self-expression. We're grateful for the opportunities, for collaboration, for connecting with readers, being able to present our work in places like this. Taking the longer view, events like this bring us closer to reaching our elusive dreams, however many and varied they may be. So we invite you all to sit back and soak up some good vibes inspired by the City of Angels, all the while getting ready to dream up or remember some LA stories of your own. Remember, all dreams aren't elusive, and some are dreams we can share together. Thanks for being part of our dream today. So I wrote 2 stories for this anthology. There was one that was from the perspective of a more mature woman who has been through the carousel of contracting jobs many times in Los Angeles, who has unexpected things happen at work and ends up feeling much better at the beginning than she does at the end. The second story I wrote was inspired by some people I have known in the past. I'm a real narcissist magnet, and I have met several in my life. It's hard to shake the ones in your family, but at least socially you can keep a decent distance, or you can, back in the 90s, move and not leave a forwarding phone number. So I went back in time. I'm a Gen Xer, so I went back in time to the 90s. I swapped a few things out from my East Coast college in Florida to CSUN in Northridge, and I came up with a story about a singer who was totally in love with himself and would not leave a certain young woman alone. So I'm going to read to you a little bit of that story. And it's called College Lessons, the name of the story is. With the spotlight on him, Leo moved, shook, and gestured along with his words. At one point, he spun and shook on stage, which had an aphrodisiac effect on the ladies near us, but gave Norma and me the giggles. Their last number, a cover of The Doors' Light My Fire, had him writhing on stage. This won him the frenzied cheers from the audience while I exchanged alarmed glances with Norma. She whispered to me, "Close your eyes and think of Kurt Cobain." We had to wait a while to congratulate the band after the show, but when we did, I noticed Leo's measured glance at me as if signaling his approval. Later that night, he called up to our room from the dorm telephone outside. We snuck him out upstairs through the side doors. We had to do this. Visiting hours were over and guys weren't allowed in our rooms. After following our lead and tiptoeing down the hallway, his voice regained its pitch when our dorm room closed. Our dorm room door closed. "Tonight was epic," he said. "Shh," I said while Norma gave him a shocked look. "Dude, the RA is right down the hall," she hissed. "Sorry," he said, then grinned sheepishly. Leo towed my side of our room, looking at the posters I'd hung, nodding in approval of my choices. Then he dropped down onto my bed and patted the bed next to himself, gazing at me with puppy dog eyes. I planned to sit on my desk chair, not next to him, not on a bed. Yes, he was the lead singer, and everyone thought he was attractive, but something was off. Girls like me didn't end up with the lead singer. We ended up with posters of the lead singer. I knew it would be awkward. Scratch that, more awkward, if I didn't sit next to him, even though it felt odd. So I did, though I couldn't uncross my arms. Norma fussed at the mirror, pulled off her necklace, and unlaced her boots. "Fun time tonight," she said. "When are you guys playing out again?" Leo rattled off some dates coming up closer to the holidays, then elbowed me. "You'll be there, right?" he asked. "Of course," I said. "We'll come whenever we can." Good, he replied. Our phone rang and I jumped. Norma, whose bed was next to it, answered it, smiled, and hung up soon after. "Jay's downstairs," she said. "We're going to run around for a while." She looked down at her stocking feet and frowned, then began the arduous process of putting her Doc Martens back on. Meanwhile, Leo's hand snaked around me and settled on my waist. I wish Norma would stay. How had I ended up like this? And what did it say about me that I was filled with more foreboding than excitement? Girls my age went crazy when they went away to school, especially when it came to drinking and boys. This was my first time alone with the boys since senior prom, and I was nervous as hell. Was there something wrong with me? I forced a smile while Norma got up to leave, jingling her keys in her hand and quipping, "Don't wait up, I can let myself in." "She's really cool," Leo said after the door closed behind Norma. "Yeah, I like living with her. She's cool," I added. So, he was giving me that look, that "I'm gonna kiss you" look. I could tell even when it was in my peripheral vision and partially shrouded by his shaggy bangs. I turned and looked at him, closing my eyes despite an odd, heavy feeling in my belly. The kiss was inevitable and mechanical, I realized after it began. Where was the chemistry? It was a firm, skilled kiss, but it lacked that essential element. He gently tried to ease me back so that we'd be laying on the bed. Unlike before, though, I pushed away and slid to the edge of my bed. Heat flooded my face and must have raised the temperature of the dorm room 5 degrees. "I'm so sorry," I said, placing my warm face in my hands. "I'm so embarrassed." "Don't be," he said, patting my back. I sensed some anger in him, as though he was doing and saying things that come off as sensitive, but it didn't seem genuine. But how could I say I wasn't interested? How could anyone not be interested in Leo? I didn't want him to get mad or force anything with me. Everything inside me said no to him. Our brief kiss had told me that. Besides, I had no experience at all beyond my high school boyfriend. "I'm a virgin," I blurted. Then I saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes. Nobody messed with a virgin unless he wanted to be her boyfriend and hang around for months and months, exclusively dating her. That was the rule, wasn't it? "No worries," he said, then stood up to look out my window. So thanks. I believe Sarah Chisholm is next. She's going to come up, hopefully not on her crutches, and read something from Serenade of a Gangsta.
Okay. So this story is called The Serenade of the Gangsta. When you grew up around here, the serenata is all you hear about. At your family gatherings, You'll hear about how so-and-so got engaged and how perfect the serenata had been. Within your school, amongst your friends, someone will bring up how so-and-so is learning to play an instrument so that he can present some girl with a serenata. Or you will hear about how much so-and-so's mariachi band cost for a serenata, so you better save if you want one. The romantic lures of the serenata never captured my attention. I've always been too busy hustling on the streets to give a damn about romance. I make a lot of money through extorting local businesses and dabbling in drug sales. On the sly, my gang is ambitious. We have carved out our territory through savagery. No one is immune to the cruelty of our reign, except the mariachi. They are untouchable. I've made it no secret among the mariachis that I operate in the select business of party favors. Everyone knows the true blood of the plaza flows from the lips and fingers of the mariachis. However, you could also say that the blood flows a little easier with the help of the drugs that line my pockets. Manuel, the leader of our gang, is always hesitant about the drug trade. I'm different. I'm not a pussy. I have a budding rap career. I have to pay for my studio time. I can peddle my goods among the mariachis and not think twice. If a mariachi wants to buy some drugs, then at least it should be from me. I wasn't surprised when an elderly mariachi dressed all in black velvet approached me. The old man had been standing near the entrance to the metro station, where colorful tiles of glass within the metal overhanging canopy looked like broken pieces of stained glass windows when the sun shined through them. The mosaic of light reflected onto a mounted bust of a woman with upraised hands and a child cradled underneath her. Now, as he tinkered towards me like some busted wind-up toy, the mariachi's arms waved in the air, giving the illusion that the fingertips of the statue and his own were brushing against one another. The moaning of the lower-level escalator sounded like cries of repentance. His left leg dragged while his guitar case bounced at his side. More than likely, he was drunk or high from the last gig's payout. In this area, the promises of Hollywood became no more than a lingered whisper. Where the residents mainly survive on meals of beans and rice, you have to be careful. If he touched me or tried to take my stash of dope, I'd have to put him in his place, revered or not. If you aren't about this Los Angeles gangsta life, then you better be careful in these streets. I dug in my pocket, slipped on some brass knuckles as easily as a new pair of underwear. I propped my hand up on the pocket of my jeans, letting the gleam of the brass greet his arrival. The usual baby blue sky and flecks of cruising white clouds were suddenly subdued. The sky was blotched with looming heather overcast. The sun's rays beamed down through gaps in billowy canopy. Cockroaches scurried from every orifice of the plaza, some huge-ass ones, skinny ones, and even some with egg sacs bending out of their backsides. My body shivered as if I had felt the sting of my old man's belt. I hated bugs. I shifted my feet and couldn't help but step on some. The crunch of their bodies permeated the slow drawl of the mariachi's throatful hum. I bobbed my head for a second, creating words to his beat in my head. So many gangsters dreaming about a rapper's life. I ain't ever giving up. I'ma get mine. I got a wad of cash so fat you could flatline. Then the bugs climbed up his legs and disappeared within his black uniform. He smiled and a feeling of doom washed over me. He was a man that was gray. You could see his teeth were partially transparent. His smile opened up the world. Placid, steel-colored saliva tainted his mouth. His face was clean-shaven with patches of flaky eczema that were as dull in color as dry toothpaste on your favorite sweater. He had strands of regal metal wire hair sticking out from the corners of his tilted black sombrero, embroidered with silver thread. I blinked a few times and squinted. My eyes searched for the bugs, then found them hanging on his suit like decorative buttons. They shined in the absence of the sun. Una serenata? He called out to me. I took off my baseball cap. My highlighter bright dreadlocks fell onto my tattooed forehead and eyelids. I flexed the bill of my cap and put it back on. I was not in the mood for the tricks and trade of a drunk. Nah, man, I barked. I remembered how to say that I didn't want something in Spanish, but long ago I gave up the polite sing-song words of my home language, replacing it with street slang and thug talk. Do you want a serenata? His melodic voice rang out. I blinked and shook my head. What you want? I dipped my head low, avoiding his light gray gaze. I had to give $1,000 more if I wanted to pay for a day's worth of studio time. I thought about exit strategies if he attempted to rob me. He stomped and ground down the heel of his boot, staining the red cement with a splatter of gray bug bits. I leaned in and said, "You want some weed, pills, trippies, what?" "Do not worry. I'm quite good, even for the likes of you." He waved his hand up and down my body, even for members of the community like you. His Spanish accent drew out. He fumbled with his guitar case. I can do elderly birthday parties. They usually don't want me for weddings. I stared hard at him before saying, "Look, old man, yes, I can see," the mariachi said while nodding. "You are missing the attendance of a good girl's company. Let me put your mind at ease." "I told you, I'm not into this type of shit," I stated. I put my hand on my pocket filled with baggies of drugs. "If you need to party, though," the mariachi frowned slightly before explaining, "I'm just saying that you are all alone in this world, just as a man is in his own death."
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Next up, we have Axel Mylans, and I'm going to read a quick bio for him. Born and raised in France, Axel Mylans is now a proud American writer, husband, and father. He lives in the Hollywood Hills with his wife, his 4 boys, and a dog named Maybe. Finally, a girl. Axel is working on a collection of short stories about the brave and sometimes tragic souls who survive, love, and die under the Southern California sun.
Hi. So the story is the story that is in the book Billboard Cowboy was inspired by a meeting that took place about 25 years ago, and at a party I met a man who had been the Marlboro cowboy on, I don't remember if it was a billboard or ad, but it was interesting because that man, who symbolized on the advertisement the absolute macho American, was in fact just an unemployed actor and model. So I like the contrast of that, and I wrote the story basically with that character in mind, and I added to that, some, of course, other character inspired by, family of mine. So anyway, I'm just going to read a few pages. So the story is told from the point of view of a 12-year-old boy. Let me see. So Uncle Larry is the billboard cowboy. As always, my Uncle Larry was slouched in a sagging brown armchair, his hairy bare feet with cracked yellow nails framing the TV set. The basketball game was on. "How was Lakers doing?" I asked, over-enthusiastic. Whenever I saw him, I always felt the need to be cheery and uplifting. "Hey, little man," he answered with a dull, tired voice. He lifted his closed fist without moving the rest of his body, keeping his eye on the screen. We bumped fists softly, and his forearm fell back on the armrest with a thump. His stomach stuck out in a round pouch, stretching his white t-shirt. Van Exel is doing good, he said, his voice trailing off. I looked down at the grayish skin of his skull, visible through his thinning blonde hair. It was hard to believe that Uncle Larry had been a successful actor in the 70s, playing the loudmouth tough guy in several movies. Later, for a while, he impersonated a rugged cowboy for a brand of cigarettes, and his chiseled face had been plastered on billboards all over the country. As of late, he was the night manager of a blockbuster video store. What about Divac? I asked to revive the conversation. When I was much younger, he used to grab me by the wrist and spin me around until I screamed, then slap his thigh, and laugh very loud, his white teeth glistening inside his mouth. Now he reminded me of a sad old dog waiting to die. I wish he'd pick himself up and became his old self again. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to go a little faster. The music of the TV became louder as a Chevy truck bounced down a muddy mountain trail on the screen. Are we going to go shooting? I asked in a low voice, leaning over. The last time I was here, my uncle had placed his index finger on his lips and gestured to follow him into the garage. After closing the door carefully, he'd unlocked the trunk of his battered Toyota Corolla. Check this out, he said, with a hint of pride. A long object was lying inside, wrapped in a plaid blanket, which he ceremoniously flipped to reveal a brand new shotgun. Mossberg 500, 12 gauge pump action. Can I hold it, I asked, mesmerized by the gleaming blue steel of the barrel. He lifted the weapon delicately and presented it to me like a precious object. With excitement, I felt the shotgun's satisfying weight, the hardness of the foregrip in my left hand, and the cold metal of the trigger under my index finger. I brought it up to my cheek, placed the butt in the pocket of my shoulder, then aimed the muzzle at a pile of cardboard box stacked against the wall. Bye, bam, I said, pretending to shoot, shaking the foregrip back and forth a few times. Okay, that's good, said my uncle, taking the shotgun away and putting it back in the trunk. Our little secret, right, Bobby? He said somberly as he wrapped it tightly. What did you get it for? I asked, wondering why all the mystery. Uncle Larry hesitated. His head blocked the light and his face was in the shadow. You never know, he whispered after a moment. Then he seemed to switch back to fun old Uncle Larry for a second and enthusiastically added, maybe you and I can go to the gun range and try it out. What do you say? Okay.
Okay, I'm going to read from a short story titled Face. Hi, I'm Cody Cisco, everyone. And this is the anthology we've all been reading from. It's Made in LA Volume 2. We're really excited about it. And we've got a few more events coming up. One is at the Last Bookstore on September 19th. And following that, on October 3rd, we'll be at Book Show. And there's a possibility we might add one or two to the season of readings. So this story Face came about when I was commuting back and forth through downtown every day, back and forth, kind of miserably. And it's about a young man who sees a face on the side of an overpass and becomes obsessed with tracking it down, trying to figure out where it came from, why he's so obsessed with it. That character's name is Dagan, and this excerpt I'm going to read is from around the middle of the story when he's gotten so desperate that he's put up a message on his Grindr profile saying he really wants help finding this face, and as you can imagine, things get kind of weird from there. So he He's gone to meet this person who messaged him. When I showed up and knocked at the door of an apartment in East Hollywood, I was breathless, my insides churning. A long row of doors and slim walkways perched over parking stalls below, a death trap in an earthquake. My mind raced. I cursed aloud, but kept most of my monologue internal. Damn this shyster for giving me hope. Curse him to a hell of saber-cocked buggery, and smash his balls in a pasta roller. My imagination was still riding high from the cannabis tincture I'd taken, apparently. The door opened. His face was unremarkable enough that for a split second, I wondered if his face was the one I was looking for. Then my vision came back into focus, and I realized his eyes were narrower, the nose more hooked, and the chin had a butt cleft that the floating face lacked. "I'm Felix," he said. "Degan, how can you help?" He ushered me inside. The gloom was only partially alleviated by faux Edison filament Christmas lights arranged in a circle and hanging from hooks on the ceiling, like a racetrack for fairies, the Tinkerbell kind. Aaliyah would have been agog at the goth kitsch on the walls, black feathers, beads, glass fragments that I was sure were marketed as Satanist crystals. There was no couch, nor any chairs in the living room, just pillows and small pedestals arranged to mark a circle the same circumference as the lights above. Below, on a 4-foot diameter disc of black marble, proof this guy had access to gobs of cash from somewhere, was a pentagram made of salt. "A proper portal to hell," I said, not taking another step. Symbols written in glitter filled the interstices of the salt shape. Glitter. "A cleansed space," he replied patiently. He put a hand on my shoulder. "I'm not promising anything. You don't have to believe, but it would help. Wait here." I obeyed, thinking that for all the out-of-touch ivory tower babble among people I'd met at the university, we had at least shared a disdain of New Age crap. Yet, here I was. "I'm not giving you any of my blood." "I don't do that," he said, this time sharply. He carried a painted wooden tray, smoothed to a black shine, and placed it at the center of the pentagon in pentagram. I sat across from him. He turned the crank on a small box, and soon the room was buzzing with some sort of drone that probably had a story behind it that he was begging me to ask about. "Have you seen the face?" I asked. "Tell me about it." "I don't know what I'm doing here." "Describe it." I sighed, my resistance ebbing. The eyes around like they couldn't see enough of the world to shake off a loss or doom. "Who is it?" "Close your eyes and make a picture in your mind. Start with the face. Only the face, nothing else. Not the overpass, not the freeway. Only the face. Everything else is black." I listened and obeyed, trying not to think about the fact that I was sitting in a stranger's apartment that smelled of mold and had my eyes closed. I was at his mercy. I pictured a knife opening my throat, an axe in my skull, hands stuffing feathers in my mouth until I choked. Knock it off, I told myself. Then the face loomed up as if illuminated by lights from below. A gulf of longing opened in the pit of my stomach. Why was I so tied to this image? Why couldn't I break free? "You are connected to your vision," Felix said, as naturally as if I'd spoken my questions aloud. "Your feelings are a reflection of the eternal truth present in every moment, every thought. We are all connected. The light of truth illuminates. The light surrounds the face. What do you see?" I saw only the face, fragile, crystalline, suspended, alone. Nothing, just the face. "Look into the darkness. Are there shapes, signs? Bring your light." I opened my eyes. Felix stared at me, eyes wide, bright white, reflecting what little light there was in the room. "Why did you contact me?" I asked. "You needed help," he said. I looked at his face again. It held the broad, sincere, and utterly useless wonder of naivete. He thought he was helping me. He was wasting my time. "This isn't a spiritual quest," I said. "I'm looking for someone." "What will you do if you find them?" I held my breath. The fantasies of holding close, smelling skin, feeling safe and warm weren't something I was going to share with this stranger. I don't plan to put a ring on it. He didn't laugh. I didn't blame him. I asked, can we keep trying? I usually charge a fee, he mumbled. For a summoning, it's $50. I pressed my lips together, thinking about what meals I would skip while we effectuated the payment with our phones. When you stop looking, things are found, he said. Fuck, this is hopeless, I muttered. I said things all the time without really thinking about them. He looked at me long and strangely, cocking his head like a confused puppy. He blinked 3 times rapidly. You're right, he said, sounding surprised. He jumped to his feet and walked past where I was sitting, wafting patchouli, body odor, and a sweet mixture of tobacco and cannabis. He ought to share his weed with me for what I was paying. He shuffled in the corner, dragged out a box from beneath a wax-encrusted coffee table, and searched through it. His labors scattered feather boas, sequined fabric, and bottles of glitter on the floor. I wondered if he knew of any good fancy dress parties I should be attending instead. He turned back to me with a piece of lapis lazuli, a violet and navy mottled lump the size of a ping pong ball, jagged, not at all manifesting the delicacy of a Goop catalog item. He held it toward me. I began to reach, but he drew back his hand, not looking at me, gazed fixed on his rock. Eventually, he met my eyes and looked at me like I was a street person approaching a stopped car at Hollywood and Vine, terrified, and said, I can't help you. What? I can't help you. I just paid you. I'm sorry, we can do a refund, a partial refund. Why can't you help me? It's not you, it's me, is that it? You're in danger, Degan. I was livid. I came here for help, not some sad riff on the Ghost movie. I can't help without... Then what's the point of you? Oh, what? You want more money? Well, you can't. You took the last of it. Without putting myself in danger. I'm sorry, I can't. Well, Felix, my boy, you're a fucking wanker, as they say, and I'll expect a refund. I opened the door and escaped, but failed to slam it as I'd intended due to the screen door getting stuck open, and I wasn't going to be his freebie repairman, so I yelled, feck off, at the screen door and walked along the ledge of the apartment landing until I was on the sidewalk and then yelled a proper American, fuck you, twice for good measure. Fucking Felix. It shamed me to have been cruel. I thought of apologizing, but he deserved my curses for wasting my time and asking for my money for a job not done, and neither of us got off. I should say the story continues from there. That's not the end.
Hello, I'm Allison Rose. I am reading from the first Made in LA anthology. My story is a modern Hollywood noir that is told through the perspectives of 4 different women. There's a journalist, there is a publicist, and a therapist, and a Hollywood photographer. And they're all kind of looped together around this one up-and-coming starlet who's taking Hollywood by storm. And all 4 of these women find that they need something from this girl. She's almost like she's the one that everybody wants. She is this bright, but also very complicated and troubled young woman. And Alice Welsh is the journalist, the entertainment journalist, and she has been trying to get this elusive interview from this bright young star, and she finally does get it, and then realizes maybe she may be a little too over her head. So I'll read, it's a few pages in, from Alice. The girl that sat across from me was barely recognizable. Unnervingly still, dressed in an oversized hoodie, red eyes staring into the distance. The previous night, I'd feared I'd gotten a raw deal, that Juliet Fairchild had brainwashed her new starlet into a prim and proper debutante. But Juliet wasn't there. Cleared of all signs of the morning's junket, in that hotel room, it was just Mallory and me. The concept of celebrity had always been a fascination of mine. Some were the epitome of their projected self, a caricature worn as a daily outfit. Others blended and formed into their environments, social chameleons for self-preservation. Then there were the few steadfast in flimsy armor, declared masters of ego in complete denial, a mere step away from full consumption by the instinctual id. They were all fragile, desperate, and severely insecure. And while I thought I had met every variation of Hollywood deplorable, how could it be that the girl sitting across from me appeared so deliberately alien? Pressing record on my phone, I leaned back, cleared my throat, and found my first question. Can we talk about what happened at Whole Foods last night? Rubbing one eye like a child just woken up, she grumbled her response. The cops said the fight started because I got out of the car. You did make a scene. By existing. The photos are revealing, I said. A smile crept across her lips. Everybody likes to see a little skin. What she lacked in vulnerability, she made up for in talent of misdirection. Are you saying you did it on purpose? Her smile dropped. They said I flashed my vagina to the cameras. That was discredited, I said. Yeah, they're still talking about it on the internet. It takes longer for real news to override clickbait bits, I said. It was a better story anyway, she said, then turned to look out the window. I had seen the censored version of those photos on the news. Then, like everyone else, Matt and I found the originals online. There was enough exposure to remind the viewer that yes, half an inch to the right was a hot young woman's pantyless pussy. I had to wonder if Mallory could smell Matt's sex on me, if she'd be pleased to learn she was the catalyst for it, if she knew my purpose for bringing up the Whole Food incident in the first place. Between broken pieces is getting a lot of critical attention, I said, trying to clear my head of the photos, trying not to match them with the girl sitting across from me. There's even talk of Oscar nominations. Is that a question? I'd like to know your thoughts about it. She shrugged. It's cool. Cool? What do you want me to say? That the movie is awful and the critics are idiots? Doing my best to soften my voice, I said, I want you to say whatever you feel like saying. You're a terrible journalist if this is how you do press gigs. You sound more like a shrink. I only want the truth, Mallory, I said. Her eyes drifted to my phone as it sat between us on the coffee table. I decided to do things a little differently this time around, she said finally. For example, I actually read the script. You don't normally read your scripts? I read my lines. The rest is pointless bullshit. You saw that horror movie I did last year, right? I didn't even know that I had a topless scene until I showed up on set that day. Might have turned the gig down if I knew, but by then everyone was so stoked to see my tits, I figured I had to go along with it. I never saw that actor's face. I had no idea who was feeling me up, but I could tell he was into it. There it was, uncensored word vomit, just like Rise and Shine Los Angeles. But you read the script for Between Broken Pieces? It was read to me. The director invited me over to his house and acted out every single scene while I watched. The original script was practically softcore porn, so there I was in the fucker's living room watching him act out 120 pages of sex scenes. Was it your idea to tone down the sexual nature of the film? I said. Of course not. I mean, some of the things he acted out were a little weird, but it was the studio's idea to combine it all into one massive sex scene. I spent 3 days naked on set. When you spend that much time pretending to fuck for a crowd, it messes with you psychologically. I had been prepared for her to be candid. I did not expect she would lead me by the hand to the depths of her reality. Mallory had somehow peeked at my cards, and she was using them against me. Messes with you how? I said, though I pretty confidently knew the answer. You get used to it, I guess. You go from being insecure to full-on exhibitionist. By day 3, I wasn't acting for the camera anymore. I was fueled by the room. My ears rung with the sound of her gasping voice, replayed in my head from the screening the night before. How many times did she attempt that one whimper before it was declared good enough to print? Or did she take her time with it? Make the director beg for that perfect sound, the one that would make everyone believe, without a doubt, that what she had pretended to feel was real. If you've never had sex in front of a camera, you don't understand how it works, she said suddenly. I almost laughed. Who says I haven't? I'm not talking homemade sex tape. I'm talking choreographed fucking, cued orgasm, CGI lust. That's the science of filmmaking, I said. And now everyone's going to assume that's exactly how I fuck, just like everything. They only know what they watch on screen, what they see in photos, what they read in interviews. Her fingers fidgeted with the zipper of her hoodie, pulling it up, then down, an inch further each time. Was she aware of the act? Or is she creating exposure through muscle memory? This film could gain you some real clout in the industry, I said. People are starting to recognize your talent. She huffed, shaking her head. No, they're not. They'll give me decent lines and assign their favorite director, but at the end of the day, all they want is to watch me run around naked, right? Isn't that what everybody wants? Swiftly, she pulled on the zipper to the hem of her sweatshirt, revealing unquestionably naked skin. She looked down at her chest, grabbed an exposed breast, and squeezed, just like the predator from that horror movie. I mean, can't really blame them. What little empathy I felt washed away like footprints in the sand. Is that how you want people to see you? I said. It doesn't matter as long as they do see me. At least that's what I've been told. She'd left her sweatshirt open, baiting me to look. And you're okay with it? It's not up to me to be okay with it, she said, voice hardening by the syllable. I'm a placeholder. There are 1,000 other girls like me wandering LA, waiting to be captured and put in the right slots. And when the mold shifts and the slots take a different shape, those girls go right back into the slush pile. We're all closer to losing our place in the mold than we realize. That's why you have to solidify yourself before it's too late. Mallory's eyes bored into me, and I no longer cared to stare at her exposed skin. If she were so aware of her fate, why did she go along with it? Why endure the fallout if it was so easily prevented? I could have stretched out a rescuing hand. I could have made her believe that she would be better off getting out before it got worse. But I didn't. Hers was a story I had spent a lifetime searching for, and here was the subject handing it to me. No analogies needed, no interpreted passages, no reading between the lines, no piecing together broken bits. It made me question if I had my microphone pointed in the right direction.
This has been so much fun. Thank you for being here and for your support. The Made in LA writers are open for submissions for Volume 3, and the deadline is October 15th. If you go to our website, madeinlawriters.com, you can see our submission guidelines, and we're looking for stories that move us. Thank you.